will there come a point with so-called artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence where it's not just the mundane tasks, Claire, that the AIs are doing. They're doing the creative stuff, the intellectual stuff.
Yeah.
Why do they need us, right? And that's
Yeah.
going to be an inflection point, a risk point for society that I don't think we're ready to deal with. I don't think that our policymakers and leaders are prepared for it. And I don't think most of us regular folks are prepared for it. And I don't think it's 2 years away or even 5 years away, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's less than 15 years away.
They may have told you to go to the big city, chase the busy crowds, find the bright lights, but no, you chose your own path to stay right here. I'm your host, Claire Bouvier. Welcome to the Small Town Entrepreneur Podcast, where opportunity is just on the other side of the door. Hello and welcome to the show, Dr. Evan Steeg.
Hey, Claire, happy to be here.
I am really excited about this episode because for the listeners, little do they know, we have been hanging out for the last couple of months, working on a lot of fun artificial intelligence projects. But before we dive into your 30, 40 plus year in AI, why are you so in love with artificial intelligence? You've dedicated most of your life to it.
I have. At first, again, thank you for having me here. I'm really happy to be here. You've had some really illustrious and exciting guests, so I'm hoping I don't drag the curve down too much. I'll try to keep up. But no, I'm a big fan, as you know. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing these days that it's impactful, right? For better and worse. I think mostly better. We have to keep our eye out for the worst. And that was the promise even 30 some years ago when I first got attracted to it. And I have to say, probably my first idea of it wasn't sort of practical, what we can do with it, how it can solve problems in healthcare and business and so forth. It was more in the intellectual level, almost a psychological thing. I was a sci-fi fan, sci-fi reader, and there were a few stories about artificial intelligences, and sometimes they were evil, right? They were rogue, rise of the machines and dangers. But there was one passage in 2001, Space Odyssey, right, which was,
Yeah.
huge movie back in the 60s when I was a kid. And there was a sequel called 2010. And anyway, in 2010, there was a scene where the scientist, Dr. Chandra, is having this conversation with the AI called Hal. And it was a friendship. It wasn't the programmer trying to program a machine. It was a friendship between two intelligent beings. And that really struck me that, is this possible? Could humans create sentient machines, right? That can think, that can maybe feel, that can speak with you. And, at that time when I was reading this or watching the movie, it was a long shot then. It was a bit of a pipe dream, but hey, aren't we seeing it today a little bit? At least glimpses of it.
And it's interesting because people like you, I like having these conversations because it's an unpopular opinion, what you just shared.
Yeah.
People don't want to build these human connections with robotics and with these machines, but you find it interesting, which is we're going to dive more into
But I have to say, even I have my doubts now. I mean, I've seen some things and seen some projections of potential dangers and such that give me pause as well. So I would say that my views have matured. They're not as golly gee Pollyanna isn't this cool as they used to be. I'm still thrilled by the possibilities, but I think I'm sober to the risks as well. And as you may know, we've discussed one of my key mentors in AI actually sort of famously left his job because he's very concerned about the risks AI poses. And equally smart people sort of dismiss his concern. So there's a real debate going on, right?
Yes. And this is where it'll be fun to kind of go into that and
Yeah.
and see what is happening. But I think it's important for the listeners to hear from someone that's you call the OG AI. When we think of artificial intelligence, AI today is ChatGPT to this world today, right? The mainstream audience, that's what we think. And I'm victim to that. I'm part of that. I too, sci-fi, always curious, but couldn't really see that existing in a real world today. So it's wild in such short period of time. We see it coming to fruition. But you have been in the space for so long. And
You keep
It's
emphasizing so long, you make me sound old, my friend. But
well, so long as an AI yeah,
yeah, I'm just kidding. It's good.
it's a mindset, but so long is actually kind of funny when you say that because when we think in, in artificial intelligent tech time, so long is like 3 months.
That's right. That's right.
But
That's right.
so let's go back.
Yeah.
You made a shift. You went to Cornell and you made a shift to go into a more of a technological focus. Is
Yeah.
this because of this book, because of this idea? What made you go into continuing to focus in AI?
It's a good question. It's kind of weird. There was a book my aunt gave me, and so I was already primed, I think, by the sci-fi stuff, by the fictional ideas of AI. And then I got a book that my aunt gave me for a birthday when around, I'm going to say 1981 or such, and it was called Escher Bach. It was by a fellow named Douglas Hofstadter, famous. It was a bestseller at the time. He was a cognitive scientist at various places, including I think University of Indiana at the time, and it was a real intellectual tour de force. It was a geek book, let's be honest, right? He went deep into the music of Bach, right? And kind of the structure of that. He went deep into Escher, MC Escher, the famous artist who drew those weird sort of self-referential drawings and paintings. And Kurt Gödel was a logician who worked with Einstein at Princeton, and not your typical pop culture fare, right? To talk about incompleteness proofs and mathematical logic. But it was a brilliant book. And one of the core themes was, how does pattern emerge from complex systems, from complex things? And is intelligence, however we define it, is that just a pattern that emerges from the interaction of lots of little pieces in a complex system? And he really explored this. And so for me, to go from the sort of science fiction broad idea to, wow, here's a guy who's actually sort of showing me how you might build it, or how you might construct it, or how it might emerge from some kind of effort. And that combination of, can it be done, and sort of, here's how some people are trying to do it. I was hooked. I was hooked, Claire. As you referred, here I was in the middle of a very expensive education. Thank you, to my parents. I was fortunate, where I was happily studying political science, economics, foreign languages, and heading to a certain sort of career in that way, probably law school. And I couldn't continue because I had this idea that I have to do this. And so I changed my major, and that cost me an extra year of undergrad, which I had to pay for. Luckily, I won some scholarships, and then obviously went to grad school, came to Toronto here in Canada to study among the best people, including Geoffrey Hinton, the so-called godfather of AI. And it's been a fascinating journey. And it wasn't the most lucrative path. I mean, to be honest, I could have left with Cornell undergrad degree, gone to Wall Street, where a lot of my friends went.
Yeah.
I'd be much wealthier now. But I always wanted to follow the intellectual muse, the interest. I mean, it's an ADHD thing, I guess, follow the shiny object, but no regrets. It's been fascinating. And I've used AI to go into other fields. I took a deep dive into biology for many years. Still fascinates me. Again, the complexity of DNA and protein and RNA, and how can it be used for healthcare and environmental remediation and so forth. But again, even biotech these days is AI powered. So it's a great place to be, right?
And it's interesting because you just said you chase the intellectual muses, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And in the academic worlds, it's very focused on theoreticals, and it's focused on looking at deeper research and the past and whatnot, and artificial intelligence, as we know, and it's very future focused where we're going. But was there a pivotal moment when you realize, okay, I'm doing a lot of academic research. I'm looking at the study between art and science and seeing these complex ideas and how we can apply them to everyday life. Was there a pivotal moment where you're like, I can see how we can now solve real problems in the real world from this high academic space?
Yeah, and it happened, I think, when I was in grad school. And again, I was just very fortunate that Jeff Hinton let me into his group. Brilliant man. I mean, it's a whole nother podcast probably, and he's done a bunch, obviously. But number one, he's smart, he's well educated, but it's also about persistence, right? And you and I have talked about this, and we're examples, right? It's when you have an idea and you don't let go, right? And even when the naysayers are, and at the time he was pushing this, I don't want to get too much into kind of technical details, but he was pushing this whole deep learning neural network kind of
Yeah.
approach, massively distributed parallel computing, when the dominant paradigm then for AI was so-called symbolic and kind of logical approach, where you explicitly lay out a bunch of conditional clauses and the expert systems of the time and so forth. So in other words, he was pushing ahead in something that the experts at the time were saying was wrong. Fast forward 25, 30 years later, they're giving him the Turing Award, basically the Nobel Prize for computer science, because he was right. Anyway, I was in this group, and of course, he also attracted other brilliant, brilliant people. And so for me, it was a combination of Jeff and his intuitions about what's the right way to go to understand how the human brain works and how we might replicate that with computers. There were mathematical, deep, deep theoreticians, people like Radford Neal, just brilliant Bayesian analysis and so forth, probability statistics, sort of the thorough theoretical grounding, the solid foundation for the stuff we were doing. And then there were smart people applying this stuff, right? And there was another fellow in the group named Sid, who, for example, was using neural networks, AI, machine learning, to pioneer ways to help people with disabilities to overcome them. His first PhD project was something that was called Glove Talk. And it was basically, you put on this glove, which was all wired up with sensors and stuff. It could tell where in 3D space you were, how your fingers are moving. And he basically used a neural network. He taught the system to learn how to do sign language, right? And it generates speech. So he would go, he'd move his hand. It would be like, hello, how are you, right? So again, very early, and there's lots more that's been done in this area and others since then. But these were the kinds of things that I saw where it wasn't just in the lab. This stuff can actually do stuff in the world. Likewise, there were people doing things with computer vision, using AI to recognize objects, recognize faces, which is now, it's everywhere. It's in your local mall. It's in the airports, right? And then I was fortunate to be contacted by people in industry, like at DuPont, for example, who said, hey, come and apply this stuff to what we do. So protein design, chemistry, biology. So early on, I had that good balance between the theoretical and the practical. And that's what really got me, during my postdoctoral fellowship to say, I really respect academia. I really respect the depth, the theory, the foundations, but I want to build stuff. I want to get stuff out there. I want to commercialize stuff and see it go. So I did my first startup. Yeah.
And it sounded like, and I did my first startup. No, this is where we're ramping here. Okay. So anyone listening might be like, wow, okay, I feel overwhelmed. Dr. Steeg, you are very intellectual and really focus on these complex ideas and deep learning with artificial intelligence. The listener right now, including myself, we're thinking, okay, AI, we're going to jump around here because we're both ADHDers. Where is it going? How does this impact me? I'm running a small business. What is it that as an individual or as a small company or business, what are the things that we need to be focusing on right now with this crazy movement that's happening so fast?
Yeah. I'm excited because I think the major thing about today's AI is that the barriers have come down. AI was the purview. It was the hoarded private possession of only the very largest companies, the very largest government agencies. I mean, people who know about Alan Turing or saw the movie about, the guy, this was the British Ministry of Defense, sort of US Defense Department, IBM, oil companies, Goldman Sachs, only these very rich, powerful, larger organizations, even 10 years ago, could really use AI. And most of us consumers and citizens were passive users at best, victims at worst, right? Where our data was used, where we were fed things, right? I mean, Netflix has been using AI to recommend which movies to watch for years, and it's harmless and they do pretty well. But we weren't users; we were the product, right? We were the viewer. And what's
we were the part of the algorithm that was feeding.
We were part of the algorithm. We were inputs, right? And as you show so well in what you do and what you teach, is now it's in our hands. It's empowering, right? The barriers have come down. There's more people trained in how to use it. There's just more people doing it with better tools and more competition in the marketplace, so that people can't charge $1 million to use an AI program. Now they have to bring it down to $20 a month or less, right? And so now we're starting to see it. The pieces in place, like having data, having goals that are clear about what you want, what you don't want, having an understanding of which tools are best for which things. And that's what
Yeah.
you and I and others are trying to help people with. But I think it's an exciting time because now AI is like another tool in your own pocket, in your own hand, in your own business.
Free accounting software is very tempting, but it's a trap. Ugly invoices, clunky tools, no understanding of your numbers, limited capacity. That's not how you win. FreshBooks isn't free, but it makes you money. The time I've saved means more clients that I can serve. Clarity means better decisions. It integrates so you don't go crazy. Stop wasting time to save pennies. Invest in growth. Invest in you. Check out FreshBooks by going to clairebouvier.com/tools or in the show notes. We were having this conversation offline and I was like, wait, let's save this for the podcast. Like, this is a good discussion, is that this idea that for so many years, and we had touched on it earlier, is that we were essentially products or byproducts of, these bigger organizations, that whether we were the inputs or part of the algorithm, we had very little control of what was being fed back to us, because whether it was, as simple as a hashtag that we've like clicked on, or something we scrolled, or something we said and our phones picked up. And I was interviewing another guest, and it was interesting. And I'm curious to hear your opinion of where we're going as a culture of media, seeing that now that we can personalize our own channels, we can curate our own deliverables, meaning that, someone can come onto your website, my website, and they can have a chat bot that just connects with the brain of Dr. Steeg. And we can privatize and customize the different learnings that people can engage with, that it's almost this idea that we're our own media companies. All of our brands now, we have way more accessibility to having the tools and to curate. Do we think there will ever be a time that the big giants of, like we look at like the Amazons and Netflix and whatnot, will that become still always prevalent? Or do you see a world where individualization and our own media channels will take preference over, the way we consume information?
That's a good question. I think it'll be a mix. And I think we're all working and playing and struggling to figure out what the right mix is, right? And I would draw the sort of two extremes here. On the one hand, yes, it's cool if I'm empowered to curate all my own, what I read, what I listen to, what I watch, whom I talk to. And by the way, not just curate, but create, right? I mean, there's the AI now helps people write songs. Like I can in 5 minutes, here's
that I have a problem with though too. That freaks me out.
It does, and there's issues around
some level of non-AI intervention.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's cool, right? Because I can get on one of these things and kind of tell it I want a song about this, and I want it to sound like Stevie Wonder 1975, etc., and it'll kind of do it like pretty well, right? But so that's all good. And again, I think it's empowering. This idea of personal curation is interesting. But I think we can also be overwhelmed, right? It's the old idea of having too many choices, right? And there's been articles and books written about the sort of some of the psychological problems in our Western society of having too much choice. It can be a cognitive overload, right? It can be almost stressful, right? There were stories about people from the East Bloc, right? From former Soviet Union, from East Germany, when they first walked into sort of Western supermarkets and like, wait, there's like 15 kinds of bread, like, 80 kinds of cereal. I don't know what to do, right? And that's kind of what it is.
I still feel like that today. And I didn't grow up in the
No, right? Yeah, and I know that I love music. I play music. I listen to music, and I am certain that there are amazing artists that I will never see or never hear because I go to my old favorites, right? But I know that I'm missing out. And so I think there's a market, and you're seeing it, for companies, for influencers, for curators to provide that for you. You can tune into someone who'll say, if you like this kind of music, Evan, I'm going to give you the stuff you like, but I'm going to mix in, like 5 new artists every week. Check it out, right? And that's good. And I think we're going to do that. And I think I think the recommender
I mean, we
system.
already see that in our,
Yeah, yeah,
with the use of Spotify and Apple
exactly.
Playlists that
Yeah,
it does. I mean, I think over time, like anything, the Watson idea of like the more you feed it, the better, the
yeah,
outputs
yeah,
are. Now, we're talking a lot about, curation and creating more and more, and there's more option and whatnot. But then on the other side, we look at the other side of the spectrum in the working world, we're now able to automate probably the most monotonous, boring parts of our jobs. The part that probably I would say a lot of people, including myself, when I worked a 9 to 5, was that idea like, oh, the
yeah,
drudgery of being like, oh, I have to do that, or oh,
yeah.
I have to plug it. Now, if you know how to use the tools and you're open to learning the tools, that part is automated.
Yes.
Maybe I don't know if you can answer this, but should this improve employee happiness at work? Or have we just created another administrative task for us to learn all these other tools that for some people, does it just put more on our plate? Now we can work faster. So if you can work faster, you should be able to accomplish
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Like, are we,
That's a
that,
problem, right? Yeah.
yeah,
The history of automation and other, quote, labor-saving inventions is that you get a
industrial
brief
revolution.
yeah, you get a brief respite where the worker's like, "Yay, this isn't quite as
This is
horrible."
awesome.
Right? And then like 3 months later, the manager kind of figures out, "Oh, now we can make you work more hours or get more productivity out of you,
Yeah.
pay you less per hour." And so there's that race back and forth. One of the raging debates these days is between the people who say AI will replace workers, right? Will replace jobs, and others saying more optimistically, no, someone who uses AI may replace you, but basically AI will enhance your job, right?
Yeah.
It will make your job better and it will create more jobs, right? And I think the honest truth, or fair if we're honest, is both, right?
Yeah.
There is job loss, there will be job loss, and there will be more jobs created, right? Just like with Henry Ford, the people who made buggy whips for horse and carriage, they went out of business, they lost their jobs. But yes, many more people were employed in making automobiles, right? And I think that will continue, and it is continuing. And I think some of the experts are quoting data on that. But I do think, and when we get into the long-term AI stuff, this will be interesting. Is will there come a point with so-called, artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence where it's not just the mundane tasks, Claire, that the AIs are doing. They're doing the creative stuff, the intellectual stuff.
Yeah.
Why do they need us, right? And that's
Yeah.
going to be an inflection point, a risk point for society that I don't think we're ready to deal with. I don't think that our policymakers and leaders are prepared for it. And I don't think most of us regular folks are prepared for it. And I don't think it's 2 years away or even 5 years away, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's less than 15 years away.
I I would agree. And I think that, the last thing we want to do is everyone listening to this episode and like, who knows, just
Yeah, run away,
freaking
run
out.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Cause I think like with anything, there's so much interest in this topic and so many human touch points at this stage that there
yeah,
is a lot of people, including ourselves, that care about how this does roll out into
yeah, yeah,
everyday life and how we use it and how we interact with it. But I do think that maybe we're not at the point where the whole funnel is dealt for us,
yeah,
but
yeah,
as we see what we call agents today, instead of the algorithms or the machine learning behind the scenes that we don't see, if we are searching for a flight, it will help find the cheapest flight to London, let's say.
yeah.
But I think we're moving the next stage, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm curious to see where the progression, the phases are going, but we're seeing it more of it. We want to buy the flight. It will now find the flight, book the flight, and suggest the next list of suggestions we need to do to prepare for the trip.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, if you say we're not ready, how can we be ready for this world where we will be interacting more and more with robots? I mean, it has a connotation of being so
I
sci-fi-ish,
know, I
right?
know. Right.
But like the reality is we do. We're waking up talking to robots. We're
Yeah,
asking, and this is for anyone. Do you say, "Hey Google, what's the news?" That is a robot. That is
yeah, yeah,
that is we are and more and more. I was just reading that they were talking about another robot that can start to finish clean up a room, tidy, get the dishes in the dishwasher, like jobs will be performed now
Yeah.
exclusively. And I'm not going to lie, I will have one of those.
Oh yeah.
There's a podcaster I listen to, and he has a robot tennis player. He had the hardest time finding people to just go play tennis with him that worked on his schedule. He has a crazy schedule. I mean, it's happening. So, where do you think we need to be jumping in and having more of a personal judgment call on how it's going to keep rolling out? Because I do agree, we are moving in a place where start to finish, it will be, there is a potential of little to no human interaction in something being performed.
Yeah, I think you have to differentiate between the personal level and the, the societal level, right? And I guess when I was talking a few minutes ago about the potential for large scale unemployment, which again, it's not here, it's not immediate, but
Yeah.
it's a potential.
But this conversation is good to have, because if we
Yeah,
don't, then the decisions we're making today, it could get ahead of ourselves in a way that we don't have.
yeah,
And that's where let's bring it back to the audience here. What
yes,
do you
sure.
do right now?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
are the
no,
ways that we can be ethical in our approach? What are the ways we can be, inclusive and making sure that we're addressing societal challenges and really creating greater impact and good social impact in our communities using
yeah,
AI?
yeah. Sort of future proofing ourselves and our
Yeah.
communities, right? Resilience, right? A buzzword these days, but important. I think we have to recognize the ongoing need for the human touch, and whether you want to take that at a kind of evolutionary biology level, that's how we evolved. Whether you want to look at it more of a spiritual level, however you want to view it, we are humans, and let's don't lose that, and we won't lose that. And so it becomes a conscious choice that are there certain things
Yes.
that you don't want the machine to do for you or with you, right? But I tell young people when I talk to them, don't forget the human aspects, the so-called soft skills, because I think, frankly, all the more that you can have an AI bot write your computer code for you, right? Write your business proposal for you and so forth, all the more reason why the soft skills. Can you talk to a customer and listen to them, understand their goals, understand their requirements? Can you sell, right? Can you inspire? Can you lead? So I think that people who dive so much into just being a technical expert as a way to race against the clock, as a way to race against the machines and keep your employability, I think you have to beware, because I think one of the differentiators, if I'm hiring, certainly is, yeah, good. You can program in Python, you can architect a solution. That's awesome. But can I put you in front of a customer? Can you write a compelling pitch, right? And even if ChatGPT drafts it for you first, do you double check it and make sure that it doesn't sound canned, that it's compelling, that it's personalized to whomever you're speaking to, right? So I don't think the human touch will go away. And that may save us both. And I mean that both in kind of the personal sense of how do I make sure I'm still employable or that my children are employable,
Yeah.
and also in the societal sense. Hopefully, our leaders in industry and government and so forth will keep in mind the need for human scale things in our entertainment, in our communities, with parks and with infrastructure.
I agree. Let's just imagine it's just you and a world of robots, like no humans.
Yeah,
Like, you have to ask yourself, and this is another deep, like, thinking question here, but like, what's the purpose of living if you're not
yeah,
building human connections? That's what we're designed, that's what we're driven by. And it's really interesting because I think fundamentally we start looking at the question of, well, what's our purpose? But more importantly, we're noticing that the use of artificial intelligence, we all can use it.
yeah.
You can get anything you want. You can ask the question, it will give you any answer. But I think for people that are using it, would you agree that the importance of being curious is one of the most crucial skill sets to have when interacting with these machine learning tools and products?
Yes, absolutely. I think curiosity is one of the most important facets in anything, right? People talk about lifetime learning, right? Hopefully, that's driven not by just fear of being unemployed. Hopefully, it's curiosity, it's love, right? It's getting into something, it's excitement, right? And we all have to sometimes do things and learn things that aren't thrilling us, and that's part of life as well. It's part of being a grown up. But I think at its best, science, art, they're both driven by curiosity.
Yeah.
scientists are all about, at least for me, it's always been, how does this work, right? Why does this protein, fold up into this 3D shape? And how is it implicated in cancer? Like, I want to understand. Yeah, I want to solve things. I want to cure things. But the first instinct is, wow, this is cool. How does it work? Right. And the same thing, obviously, with art. I mean, one of my favorite painters is Caravaggio, right? Italian Renaissance. And a lot of artists, he was driven. He had to do it. He had to paint, right? And he was clearly fascinated with light and dark, right? With the juxtaposition of light and dark. And I think it's curiosity. It's, what if the sun were coming in on, St. Peter at this angle, and what would it look like on his skin? What would it look like on his clothing? What would it look like reflecting off the shiny armor of the soldier? It's curiosity. It's let me try this. Let me see what it looks like. And certainly with the AI tools today, curiosity should propel you to try them and to dive deeper with them. And again, as I've seen you demonstrate in your courses, it's a necessary thing, because you shouldn't just accept the first answer out of the so-called mouth of these things, right? You ask a question to one of these LLMs, and sometimes it's really good right off the bat, but often it's like, what? And so
You're
you
like,
have to,
wait a second.
yeah, you have to
Yeah.
prompt it and kind of reprompt it and sort of direct it, so it becomes more of a dialogue, just like an interview with a human, to elicit answers that are sensible and hopefully solve your problem. Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. This sense of curiosity just drives the next question further. And the more those questions keep coming up, we start to see more holes or gaps in whether we're building something, because then it becomes like, we see when we look at, like, let's just take a big institution that we can see is hugely impacted. I don't know about you, but I can see it, weirdly enough, feeling in some capacity it's shifting, crumbling, paradigm shift, the education system. When you think about it, and I come back, from being a high school teacher, that there is a way to teach. There's been a way for so many years, decades and decades of this, teachers in front of the classroom, and they're sharing the knowledge and information and encouraging discussion around a topic, but ultimately the teacher is leading the discussion. Well, now there's been, just from an educational point of view, there's been a huge shift where the knowledge is now of equal to the teacher. Experience,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
another thing. Teacher has more experience, but it's got to shift the way we're teaching and we're
Yes.
learning, because I have the same access to knowledge as you and anyone else, and it's changing the way that we're learning. When you were in school and you look at today, what is what is the way that we navigate this new way to educate, Dr. Steeg?
As you know, I used to teach as well, and I loved it. I didn't love sometimes the bureaucracy around, the
Who
administration
does?
and so forth. But I love teaching. I love, especially a smaller class, right? That look in the eyes when the student gets it, right? And that satisfaction, there's nothing quite like it. People talk about a generation or so ago, oh, we have calculators now. How do we teach math, right? How do we teach,
This is true. Yeah.
right? Because the kids are just going to click, right? And now, of
Advanced
course,
calculators when they came out.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And now it's like, why even assign a problem set or an essay? Because we know they're going to go to ChatGPT to do it, right? That really fascinating kind of workshop that you had last year downtown Kingston, right? Where Kevin DeLucio, the dean of Queens Engineering, he and a couple other folks addressed that issue as educators, right? He gave a fascinating answer, I thought. It was, I'm hoping that the way our professors will handle things now is, not so much to test, do you know this formula? Can you solve this equation? That's a given that, the machines are going to do that anyway, right? So now it's more like, I want to see people give assignments that are more like, tell me the multi-step process of how you would solve global warming, right? I mean, down to like what stakeholders to bring in, what kinds of engineering need to be applied, what are the key technologies, what are the costs? In other words, to think at this bigger level, at this bigger
Because
sort of
we
chunk,
can't.
right?
Yeah.
Not the micro level of, how do I solve this, but more
Yeah.
like, wow, you engineers, you are our future. You're going to save our world or destroy it, right? So think big. I'm being silly here, but how would you build a bridge from New York to England, right? Like, what steps would you take? What are the challenges, right? and let the machines work out the fine details, right? Of,
Yes.
of concrete structures and static stresses on iron and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and I love that. That is what it is. I can't help it because I think I'm like you. I think so optimistically about what technology can do,
Mhm.
whether it's accessibility. Like we live in a multimodal world where you can communicate in any medium. For so many decades and years, it was so text heavy. It's talking and writing, and now it can be talk and pictures and images and video format, and it can be integrating multimodal. Maybe it's finally an opportunity to have more accessible learning environments
Yes,
that are
yes.
not catered to the standardized testing of one student. Here's a test, here's a multiple
Yeah,
choice. Okay,
yeah,
you failed, so you're not that smart.
yeah.
Funny enough, this is so super tangent. I took a cognitive test. I love applying for random jobs just to see the process. I just find it entertaining. Well, I couldn't even move past the first stage of the test because I failed the cognitive part 32%. It was all these like questions. And then I was thinking, I'm like, this is what AI could solve
Yes.
because it wasn't the big problem solving. And I think even at these like job application levels, and maybe I'm like butthurt here that I like failed the cognitive testing and couldn't even apply for the job. But I think even at that level is that what are we teaching or what are we assessing? Like we've been assessing this like,
Yes,
is it
yes.
A, B, C, D, or E?
Right,
And
right.
like the real world, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't an A, B, C, D, E. There's a all of above, find the best one that suits this,
Yeah,
you know.
yes,
And so, if we're building a future still of choose A, B, C, D, or E, hypothetically speaking,
yeah,
how are we setting anyone
yeah.
up for success when we're not solve the big problem the best you
Yes,
can,
yes,
use the
yes.
tools?
I feel you because again, we've talked about our ADHD and so forth. And the way I look at it, my mother used to say, there are a million different ways to be smart, right? There's people who are very verbal, there's people who are very mathematical, there's people who are very right, hands-on, practical, right? There's just I knew a girl growing up who was, quote, terrible in school and so forth.
Yeah.
She had this ability with animals, like the horse whisperer. It just was amazing, this communicative ability. And it turns out that's what she does for a living, and she's great at it and she loves it, right? And I'm going to let our audience in on a secret here. Only a few of my friends know, but I think it's interesting about sort of the failure of the assessment system, the testing systems
Yeah.
in education. So, long story short, I was accepted into Cornell University, one of the top schools in the world as an undergrad, with the proviso, I was told verbally, you are accepted into the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell as long as you do not go into mathematics or science. Because my verbal SAT score was like really high, kind of off the
Yeah.
charts. My math score was below the average for Cornell undergrads. And guess what? I ended up with a degree in mathematics with an A average with highest honors. I won a scholarship. Again, it's not look how smart I am, whatever. It was a lot
No,
of
no,
dogged.
no, no. I
No,
agree.
it's dogged effort. It's hard work. It's dedication. It's
Yeah.
focus. It's doing what you have to do. But it also tells me, by the way, that our testing systems kind of suck, and that be very careful to dismiss anybody because they quote failed something or didn't get a certain grade or didn't get a certain score, because you never, and by the way, same for yourself and same for your children. Don't accept it if someone says, Johnny or Jane, can't do well in school. No, no. Talk to the teacher, get a better teacher, get a better school. We all have immense capabilities that can be brought out with the right facilitation. I don't even call it teaching, it's facilitation. It's inspiration, right? It's leading, it's helping you learn, right?
Yeah.
Um, People are naturally curious. Claire, you have a young child at home. One of the things that fascinates me about little kids, right, when they go through this stage of why are there clouds? And then you answer that and they go, well, why this? And why is the sky blue? And why does it have to rain at all? And why is there lightning? And it's this natural curiosity, this natural intellect, right? Which unfortunately sometimes the school will beat out of
Fades.
them. Yeah,
It
yeah,
does fade, and I
yeah.
think and to come full circle, how does AI play a role in the education? I'm curious to think or curious to know from you, do you think this is finally an opportunity to, at the very least, build a proper diagnostic tool
Mm.
that, I always think, any Harry Potter fans out there, but the sorting hat,
Yes,
you're
yes,
like, it's not about you're level 1 or you're failing, you're in Gryffindor or you're in
yeah,
Slytherin.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you belong to a certain type of people. Or the Divergent series, another great
yeah,
series.
yeah,
I love the idea where they divide population based on skill sets and temperaments, and I think, it's written about, but we don't see it happening in every day. And I think maybe artificial intelligence, now that we have we have so much
yes,
data, it
yeah,
can
yeah,
now create these patterns and build out, like, here is the perfect, because I remember arguing someone being like, I do believe that we can start personalizing education, like, and they're like, well,
yes,
teachers have enough on their plate. And I said, no, but I'm hoping that this
yeah,
now creates more personalization and accountability on the student in some capacity. But the idea that the education is the foundation of our future. The students that are here today, what are they learning so that they can solve the real big problems?
yeah.
So, with a final thought, with a few, like, wrapping up this episode, Dr. Steeg, if we look into a optimistic, forward-looking view into the future, what would you say if they didn't take anything from, like, this whole episode is just like, where are they going with this? What are they
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
say? I think we've brought up a lot of, things to question and to look at and to be curious and all these things. But as an individual, as an organization, moving into the future with a very AI driven future, so to
yeah,
speak,
yeah,
how does one balance this beauty of innovation, ethical implications, accessibility, and making sure we keep that human centric touch into the world? What would you tell these individuals moving forward into the future now that you've seen
yeah.
decades of AI
Yeah.
movement?
Well, let's start small and then we'll crescendo out big, okay? Uh, so
Great musical reference.
at the micro level, this accessibility of AI, this barriers coming down in terms of cost, usability, and so forth. There are organizations, there are people for whom even just a dashboard, right? Even not even code intelligent, not even AI, just getting certain data about, let's say, what's going on in the organization, what's their sales history, right? How many dollars of business did my little company do in Belleville, Kingston, and Brockville last year? Are there any trends? Are there any seasonal trends, right? Are there reasons why Brockville is underperforming compared to Belleville, right? Or
Yeah.
vice versa, right? Even a dashboard that isn't quote smart, I think, can surface certain facts that obviously an owner or manager wants to know, and that's crucial. And I've seen this, and I've helped people with this, so that's really cool. Just even knowing what's going on is a big step.
As
You get
opposed to, without AI, is manually going through pages and pages and pages of data and trying to, not to, but like a very biased perspective of the data and trying to come up with some sort of
yes,
conclusion. That's what I'm just saying. I just want to, for those of us listening, is
yeah,
what the transformation having AI.
yeah,
Before we
yeah.
have all this data and you're like, what do I do with it? And
What do I do with it?
now you're
Not
saying,
yeah.
we
It,
see the interface, or we see a page of just like, hey, here are the results.
Exactly. And so again, it's a step by step. You crawl, then you walk, then you run, right? And so number one, sometimes just getting the data and just putting it in a dashboard, a visualization, just seeing it. That's step one. And by the way, the human brain is great at this. And the cool thing is that this can now be scaled
Yeah.
because, you can maybe memorize 30 customers or even 300 customers, but can you memorize 3,000 customers? That becomes tricky. So this is where the data, the analytics, the AI can help. So step one, just have the data, have a dashboard. Step two, to your point, what if it could be made a little bit more automatic? What if instead of having to look for something or sort of have someone program the dashboard to tell you something, what if there were these alerts that came up and say, hey, this festival is happening in this part of Eastern Ontario. I think this is a great selling opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Heads up, June 12th, check it out, right?
Yeah.
Have this product ready,
It's
right?
triggered to align with your interests that have been.
Exactly. So it's demand forecasting. I think I told you this, Claire. There was a talk that someone gave, I think it was someone from IBM actually, about personalization. And you and I sometimes think about personalization, naturally enough. sort of a personalized email, a personalized message, a personalized, mailing if you're doing, marketing, marcom outreach, fundraising. That's all good. But this in this talk they talked about personalization is everything. It's not just having the right message, it's having the right product that the person wants. It's having it at the right time, it's having it at the right price. So personalization for a company is, or for a nonprofit organization, it's really a whole philosophy, it's a whole approach, and it's a commitment, right? And AI can
Yeah.
certainly help this, right? You go from the static data and dashboard to automatic alerts to, prediction, right? Predictive AI, which is a big thing. And that was what most of AI was up until, the generative AI stage of about 3, 4 years ago. And now you have generative, where it's not just, oh, I've got the alert, I should write the message. Now it's like, oh, I don't have to write the message. The AI will write the message. The AI will write 1,000 personalized messages
Yeah.
for all my customers
Yeah.
based on a segmentation of the customer data by demographics, by geography, by previous
Language.
responses,
Yeah.
by language, right? So that's the dream. And again, you don't have to start big the way that, IBM or ExxonMobil is
No.
doing it. As you've shown again with your courses, getting 5 or 6 skills with a LLM model under your belt, that can facilitate huge time savings for a busy business owner or
I
professional.
guarantee 5 hours a week you will save.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's great. And this is a great way to, I hope that the listeners have enjoyed listening to the brilliant Dr. Steeg talk about all these fascinating elements of artificial intelligence and also the human centric movement of humans and where we are going with building communities and building new products to include everyone. You're booking a lot of things
yeah.
on the road. I know you are leading going into 2025 into Bali, keynote speaking on topics of a lot around security and privatization. Do you want to speak on some of the big topics that if people that are listening thinking, "Oh my goodness, I need to have Dr. Steed come in and build out a product or come speak to our organization." Can you share with the audience what you love to talk about
Sure.
specifically?
Yeah. Again, for me, it's about the barriers coming down, democratization of AI, right? Don't just be a victim of AI, be an owner, be a user to do this right on a scalable way, right? Which, most companies want to grow at some point, grow their revenues or grow their customer base or just grow the degree of automation so they can spend more time on the golf course or with their kids. At some point, you're going to have to connect these AI systems to your own data, right?
Yeah.
And it's a topic I do a lot about, kind of so-called ethical AI, privacy, non-bias, security, interpretability, transparency. These are some of the elements of ethical AI. It means doing things right. Ethics is a fancy word for doing things right. It means doing things right. It means doing things legally. It means, avoiding regulatory traps, right? It means being a reasonable, good member of our community. And so, anyway, the details of how to do ethical AI, how to, for example, make sure that when you're talking to an LLM, your personal, confidential, proprietary data is not just going to the cloud or going to whoever's going to sell it next.
Yeah.
That can be challenging. How do you connect something? How do you have a hosted system, right? Your own hosted private database, either on premises or in the cloud, secure cloud. How do you connect it to the AI systems? It's all very doable now. This is something that if it were 5 years ago, I'd have to say, okay, have you got $500,000 to spare? Right? I can set something up for you. Now it's more like this is affordable. This is
Yeah.
something that can be done. There's tools out there. So I just found out I'm going to be going to Bali, Indonesia in December, which is I love Canada, but it's a great time to leave Canada.
It's okay to say you want to go to
Yeah,
a tropical part of the world. I am very envious, but I am so excited for you to start speaking around the world on these topics and changing, the world. I love the idea of ethical AI, and for anyone that is knows that this is very important to their organization, to their business, and to the growth of their company. In the show notes, you'll be able to check out Dr. Steeg, his website, his work, and how you can connect with him and book him going into 2025. I can't believe it's not even that far from now, even though we're talking April, but it's crazy
yeah.
how much is happening. So, Dr. Steeg, you are offline, online. It's so fun to connect with you. I've learned so much.
Likewise.
We'll have you back on. We will, I'm sure so much has changed in, we say the 3 month is like 10 years in AI. But thanks for joining this conversation, the small town entrepreneur. And I hope that we just keep discussing these things that are happening and keep the human side and the human element to the technology that's being built.
For sure. It's an exciting time. Great to be here. Thank you again.